Have you ever heard of leashes that can hold back an erupting volcano? Well, if not, there's a good chance you will now, because that's exactly what we're talking about in today's episode of Fake Science. Yellowstone National Park is one of the most beautiful places in North America. Famous for its geysers, hot springs, canyons, and wildlife, Yellowstone attracts over 4 million visitors each year. But few people realize that the whole area is sitting on top of a supervolcano. And by supervolcano, I mean one of the largest volcanoes on Earth with the potential to destroy entire cities and cause global climate change. It's no wonder that the US government keeps tabs on this thing, monitoring it closely and developing plans in case something goes wrong. That's right, they have a secret plan to stop the volcano from erupting. And they won't tell anyone what it is. So naturally the public has gotten a little bit creative in trying to fill in the blanks. Take, for example, this image here that started circulating online a few years ago. It shows two men standing next to an enormous metal ring buried deep in the ground. The ring itself is hooked up to some sort of pumping mechanism, and winding its way through the trees is a thick cable connected to a heavy steel plate on the other end. This all might look like the setup for some kind of bizarre sexual encounter. But according to some very reputable sources, this is actually a top-secret doomsday device designed to keep the Yellowstone supervolcano from erupting. In fact, similar images have popped up multiple times across various parts of the park. There are even rumors that the government is crisscrossing the entire region with these devices, each one equipped with enough explosives to halt an eruption in its tracks. Now, since the actual government plans are classified, it's impossible to know whether or not this is true. But given how many people would need to be involved in such a scheme and how much it would cost, it seems pretty unlikely. Not to mention, even if these devices did exist, they wouldn't work. That might seem like a weird statement to make without any context. So let me start at the beginning. The Yellowstone supervolcano isn't your average volcano. I mean, yeah, it's technically 3 different volcanoes that all happen to be in the same place, but also it's huge. In fact, it's so big that it's been difficult to figure out exactly how it works. At first, scientists thought it was just one gigantic magma chamber with magma accumulating beneath the entire area. But more recent studies suggest that there's actually 3 separate magma chambers, one beneath the Norris Geyser Basin, which is here, another one beneath the Old Faithful area, which is here, and a third one further down to the southeast near the town of West Yellowstone, Montana, which is here. Now, why is this important? Well, it turns out that these 3 magma chambers are connected by some sort of plumbing system, and in order for the volcano to erupt, pressure needs to build up in the magma chambers until it overcomes the strength of the surrounding rock and blows everything to smithereens. But the pressure doesn't just come from the magma itself. As the magma heats up the surrounding rock, it also causes steam to form. And as the steam gets trapped inside the plumbing system, it builds up pressure and contributes to magma chamber inflation. So if you want to prevent an eruption, you basically have 2 options. You could try to cool the magma down, but that would require pumping enormous amounts of cold water into the volcano, which could pose all kinds of unpredictable risks. Or you could try to get rid of the steam. This idea isn't as crazy as it sounds. Humans have been artificially venting steam from geothermal systems for decades in order to harness the energy inside. And that brings us to our story. Back in the 1980s, geologists noticed that the middle magma chamber had been slowly inflating. By monitoring the ground, they were able to track the movement of the Earth's surface and estimate the pressure building up inside. What they found was alarming. If the pressure continued to increase at its current rate, it would eventually exceed the strength of the surrounding rock and cause an eruption. So instead of waiting around to find out what would happen, the United States government decided to take action. In 1985, the USGS began a project called the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory to monitor the volcano more closely. A few years later, they installed their first ever steam vent, basically a giant straw that would siphon off some of the excess steam from the magma chamber. But when they looked at the data, it quickly became clear that one steam vent wasn't nearly enough. In the early 2000s, they added a second vent, and finally, in 2006, they were able to close the book on this particular project. But here's where things get interesting. Sometime between 2006 and 2013, the government stopped publicly reporting data on the steam vents. And if you ask them why, they say it's to protect the site from vandalism. But a lot of people aren't buying that answer, especially because they started releasing the data again in 2017 after they upgraded the vents to make them harder to find. Now, here's the thing. Nobody knows exactly where the steam vents are located, but we have a good idea. Steam vents don't look like much. They're just holes in the ground with some rocks nearby. But because they vent steam directly from the magma chamber, they're significantly hotter than your typical hot spring or geyser. In fact, the water boils almost as soon as it hits the surface. So if you were hiking around Yellowstone and you came across a hot spring that didn't look like your typical hot spring, well, you might have stumbled onto one of the government's super-secret volcano leashes. Okay, so the government definitely has steam vents, but how do they work? And would they actually stop an eruption? Well, as it turns out, these simple devices are the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. Okay, maybe that last part isn't quite true, but they do play an important role in understanding what's going on beneath the surface. See, the problem with monitoring the magma chamber is that you can only measure what's happening at the surface. Sure, you can drop some fancy instruments down into the steam vents, but there's only so much you can learn from that. To really understand what's happening, you need to get a direct measurement of the pressure inside. That's where these bad boys come in. Okay, I guess they're not that bad. Okay, maybe they are kind of cute. Their official name is the Maintenance Hole Pneumatic Pressure Transducer Assembly, which is a mouthful, but you can call it a pressure gauge. The way it works is pretty straightforward. Inside the pipe is a device that measures the pressure of the steam, and that signal is sent via radio to a receiver on the surface, which then relays the data to the rest of the world. Now, that still doesn't explain how they would actually stop the volcano from erupting. I mean, do they just turn the steam into a solid to plug up the hole? Well, not exactly. Stopping an eruption would require pumping massive amounts of water into the magma chamber. And while it might sound similar, depressurizing a steam vent is a completely different process. All it does is release some of the excess pressure. Now, this raises another question. Why would they bother monitoring the vents if they can't do anything about it? Well, it turns out that they actually can. See, before the early 2000s, scientists had no idea that magma could be pushed out of the ground without triggering an eruption. But when they installed those first couple of steam vents, they learned that it was possible to depressurize the magma chamber without causing an eruption. So by carefully monitoring the steam vents, the government can keep the pressure in check and reduce the chances of an eruption. It's not exactly the doomsday device that some people might have hoped for, but hey, it works. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to help support the channel, consider becoming a member. Members get access to a ton of exclusive perks like bloopers, behind-the-scenes posts, and even the power to request topics for future episodes.